How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Talk4 Podcast. So excited to have you here today and show you this fantastic episode. Just want to say quickly that episodes like this one and all the ones before and the ones in future are made possible by people who subscribe. Hopefully, just like you. I'm going to ask you today if you can leave a subscribe, leave a follow, leave a rating, leave a like or a comment, and just support the show in the little ways that you can, like that. It makes a huge difference on my end. And quickly, just want to plug as well. I've taken 30 of the best episodes of this podcast and turned them into a fantastic book that goes into 150 secrets to greatness. Each one of those 30 episodes gets crunched down into 5 of the best key takeaways from the whole talk and turns them into a fantastic book. Highly recommend you check it out. Please support the show by grabbing a copy, either a paperback or an ebook. And I can't wait to show you guys this one today. So guys, without further ado, let's get over to the episode. How's it going, guys? Welcome to episode 140 of Talk4, the Quickfire podcast, where we ask 4 great questions to unique and interesting people. Behind the mic today is your host, Louis Skupien. That's me. Let me introduce our incredible guest for today, James Loper, who's going to be answering our questions today. So, James, honored, humbled, excited, and grateful to have you here. This is just going to be a great podcast, and can't wait to speak to you about all these great subjects. But I mean, most importantly, how are you doing? How's your day been so far? And thanks for joining me today for the show. This is going to be great.
Oh, I'm great, Louis. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
It's going to be a whole lot of fun and a long time coming too, but we always start off with the elevator pitch. So we just want to introduce you to the people listening in today. So just a bit of a snapshot into the life of you, really, 30 seconds, 60 seconds roughly, just a bit about who you are, what your day job is, and basically kind of like a snapshot into the life of you, really. So hit us up with that, and then we're going to dig into the backstory and all the great stuff you get up to at the 920th.
Oh, great. So my name is James Loper. I'm the command chief, so the senior enlisted leader for the 920th Rescue Wing here in Patrick Space Force Base, Florida. It's the largest rescue wing in the Air Force. 4 locations here: Langley, Portland, and Davis-Monthan is where our airmen are at. So my job is to help make this mission happen from this seat up here. I've been in almost 30 years, so this would be my 5th senior leader position, my 4th command chief position, and started off in 1995. I'm a nuclear command and controller by trade, so I'm not rescue born and bred. This is my first assignment in a rescue wing, so I've had a lot to learn coming here to do that. And I've been here for just over 2 years now. So
nice.
That's where we're at.
That's great. Let's dig into that on the big scale then. So like you said, 1995. Since then, you've risen through the ranks to become the Command Chief Master Sergeant of the 920th Rescue Wing. It sounds awesome, but we want to see kind of just a bit about how that all came about, what the initial kind of pulls to the Air Force really were, and just kind of a bit about what your ambition was, and a bit more on kind of like the backstory of, how your career looked going into it, and just how that all came about, really, what the inspiration was.
Ooh, wow. So that's a good question. In 1995, 18-year-old kid graduating high school, didn't really know what I wanted to do, right? Had some ideas. I went to a great college prep school up in northwestern Pennsylvania, and obviously college was primarily what I was going to go do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, or like when I grew up. 30 years later, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. So just, there's a little secret for you. But so I decided, my family's a very military family. My father served in Vietnam in the Army. My brothers have served, uncles, cousins, and all different services. I'm the first one in the Air Force, right? So obviously that was a easy go to, right? I'll join the service and see where that leads. Ambitions, I think the first 4 years was to make it through the first 4 years, right? I didn't really think, I don't think anybody really knows that they're going to do this for a lifetime until you look back and you're pushing 20 years in and you're like, holy smokes, I'm almost 20 years in, right? So I might as well keep going. But I always tell folks, every morning when I lace up my boots, if there comes a day I don't want to do this anymore, then that's probably the day I should stop doing this. And that hasn't happened yet. So I'm, pretty excited about that I've been able to make a life out of this, and it's been a great life. But I've had some great mentors along the way, right? Which I really think um, have helped keep me moving in the right direction. Because like I said, you're my first assignment in North Carolina, right? You're a young 18-year-old, 19-year-old living in the dorms, um, a couple hundred miles away from where you grew up with people, and you just have lots of opportunity to do all kinds of things that you probably shouldn't be doing. But I've had primarily my first real mentor was this senior master sergeant Billy Purdue, so E8, had been in since Vietnam, right? And we're talking in the mid 90s, and really for some reason kind of took me under his wing and showed me and it was always there, right? To kind of keep an eye, tell me when I was doing things that were pretty stupid, and I probably shouldn't be doing those things. And then kind of just kept an eye on me by keeping me gainfully employed at work, and out of trouble, right? Idle hands is a thing. And it was just always a good example. A good example as a father, a good example as not my father, obviously, but a good example as a husband, a good example of just a good human being. So you don't run into those people that kind of have the full gambit too often. You run into people that are great at their job, or they're just good people, but to really, for some reason, just take you under their wing and kind of keep an eye on you, all the way through up until I ended up taking his job as the superintendent of the command post. Um, you know, 15, 14 years after I met him, right? So it was really just impactful. So that makes a difference. So that was a lesson learned that nobody actually told me, but when you look back and reflect and you go, what makes the difference in your career? That's usually that one or two people that you come across that push you in one direction or the other and kind of keep you moving. And then things just kind of work themselves out. So
Really interesting. Have you found at all that experience you had with that guy, has that come full circle at all for you, where you've then been able to kind of repay that experience and that mentorship and stuff to someone younger now, where it's kind of like that thing that he gave you and that good deed is kind of passed on now through you to someone else? Has that happened for you?
I hope it has. I'd like to think it has. I mean, my first command chief assignment was at Seymour Johnson, the 916th Air Refueling Wing, and then I went out to Nellis at the 926th Wing, and then on to 10th Air Force. So I've had an opportunity to influence thousands of people over my career. I hope that I have positively in some way, but you get the occasional note every once in a while from somebody that says, "Hey, I really appreciate, I saw you do this, or I saw you do that." But it's not why you do it, but you hope that you have a bigger impact, that maybe uh, you've helped push somebody in the right direction, or help keep somebody from making a bad decision over your career, and just been a positive example, whether they even noticed it or not. So you hope you do that. You think you have, but you know I would assume so. I just wouldn't want to be so forward to think that definitely, right? I try, but I don't know. I think so.
I'm sure
I hope
you
so.
have. I'm yeah, no doubt about it. To at least one person, or thousands of people. I'm sure you've had a massive impact there. And so, one of the things I like to cover on the show, if you've heard some of the episodes, really, is just that big question of, our leaders kind of made or born? And I think we get closer to the true answer of that, every podcast really and stuff. But through these positions you've had, nuclear operations, refueling wings, now rescue operations, what were some of those kind of key moments that you felt kind of built you as a leader? So any experiences there, or stories and things, or moments in time there that really kind of gave you those reps, or gave you that big lesson, the light bulb moment towards just building you into the kind of the leader you are today? Anything there?
Um, oof. I think every day, right? I don't know. I'd have to think about any one specific uh, thing, right? There's always those moments, right? There's those moments. I was on console, on September 11th, right? That morning, it was my first day back off leave, and um, with Senior Master Sergeant Purdue, as a matter of fact. But you have those moments that really kind of steer you in one direction or the other. But I don't necessarily know. I mean, I've had such a um, great opportunities to work with such great leaders, right? So the wing commanders that I've had from Colonel Gilmore at Seymour Johnson and Colonel Schenkenberg to General Miller and General Borgen at 10th Air Force, and now here with Colonel Hamilton, right? I've had some great exposure, right, to leaders. I think that probably started probably the career field, right? As a nuclear command and controller, right? You're in what's called the emergency action cell, right? And you work in the crisis action team or the battle staff, right? So as a young airman from just a one striper airman, I'm sitting in the battle staff with general officers who went on to be 2 and 3 star generals or 4 star generals that I've bumped into in the future, and watching them make decisions right there at the tactical level, right? And day in and day out, and you don't even realize the opportunity of the room that you're sitting in until you're much older, right? And you just kind of, I don't even want to say through osmosis, but you just kind of pick up on why and how they make some of the very difficult decisions. And that's really what leadership comes down to, right? I mean, you can't get everything done, and you can't make everybody happy. You have to make a decision, and that decision is going to have positive and negative consequences, and you have to understand those, and you have to make that decision anyway, because that's what you're there to do. And you hope it's the right decision, and you learn that no decision's final, and you can go back and make adjustments, right, and continue to refine that decision, hopefully. But so I've learned that at a very young age that it's just a constant thing. There's no big moments. It's just over time after time of just being involved. If that makes sense. I don't know
Yeah.
if that
No,
makes sense or not.
that makes
But
total sense.
that and I said I just don't know if there's any big moments like in my career that like I can point to this one moment or I will say there was one opportunity. See, I was down at headquarters. I took one of my previous wing commanders asked. He was down at headquarters at Robbins, Georgia, the major command headquarters, and asked if I could come down and look at his battle staff that they were setting up and see. I was a senior master sergeant, so an E8 at the time, and if I could just see what they were missing, because he's like, I don't think I'm getting everything out of, like, I don't think we're set up correctly, right? More of a process improvement type thing. So I came there to spend a week and a half, just sitting in the battle staff and just kind of seeing how their checklists were run and how their processes were run. And I ended up bumping into this colonel, this 06, in the hallway, just by happenstance, walking down the hallway. And that's when he offered me an opportunity if I would come to headquarters and help stand up the nuclear operations division at that headquarters. So something I hadn't even thought of really doing. Like, why would I leave my nice command post at Seymour Johnson? I'm happy here. Things are good here. I don't have to leave. And just that happenstance conversation in the hallway, like, really kind of changed the trajectory, because without that conversation, I would not be here today, because it wouldn't have opened up the doors that were required to get where I'm at here 13 years later. Actually, 13 years later. So that being said, like, being open to opportunities and just not being closed-minded, and having those conversations kind of opens doors, and you just never know where they're going to go. Yeah. So that's kind of that fork in the road moment, I think, that changed what opportunities were going to present themselves in the future. Because I could have very well stayed right where I was, and I probably would have retired, almost 10 years ago and been perfectly content. But you just never know. So.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. So let's talk about what you're doing now then. So Command Chief of the 920th Rescue Wing, you oversee a vast team across multiple locations. I would love to just dig into what that entails then. So walk us through the scope of your responsibilities. So what it takes to lead a mission-focused organization of that size, and kind of like what your role entails really, and then maybe a bit about also what the rescue wing exactly does. Like, who are you kind of going after? Who are you rescuing? Is it broad? Is it focused? Yeah, tell us all about it.
So the 920th Rescue Wing here at Patrick is, like I said, the largest rescue wing in the Air Force Reserve Command, or the only rescue wing in Air Force Reserve Command and the largest in the Air Force. It's 2,500 airmen. We have 3 squadrons of Guardian Angel, so pararescuemen and combat rescue officers, right? It's a bigger weapon system than just those, but it's Guardian Angel's weapon system. HH-60s, 2 squadrons of those, one here and one at Davis-Monthan, and then a squadron of HCJ-130s, right? So those 3 weapon systems make up what we call the triad, right? Which basically means we have all the parts and pieces we need to execute the mission, right? So that's unique, that we can really train together, do full mission profiles, and really get good at what they do. So that's just the 6 op squadrons. I've got 15 other squadrons of what we call agile combat support, right? So logistics, rescue defenders, right? Services, personnelists, like all the things that make the machine work, right? Because the cool videos that everybody sees on TV or whatever, you know, of the helicopters or the PJs jumping out of the back of the 130 or airdropping things in, all of those things are great. But there's so much that goes into making all of that happen, and have all of that here at the 920th, right? Takes a lot. So the first thing is, well, there's a lot of management of that too, right? And I'm going to define the difference between management and leadership, right? Because they're 2 completely different things. I mean, you'd think that everybody knows that, but I don't think everybody fully gets it, right? The management stuff, you know, the budget, the manning, the appraisals, all of those things, right? Those management tasks, there's quite a bit, as you can imagine, because I have to keep an eye on all of that with my wing commander, right, and the other leadership team members here at the wing. So I've got that. The key is to, and I think it took a little while to learn this. This is why it's nice that this is not my first assignment. Is to not get locked behind my desk, stuck in those management tasks, head down all the time. It's to get out to visit, you know, if not every one of those 2,500 airmen, every one that I can, as much as possible, right? Because you got to get out and see what's happening, right? What it takes to make this mission work, right? So that was task 1. Because I'm not born and bred rescue. I don't come from this background. I come from something completely different. So just the culture here in this community, as in any other special warfare community, is very, very tight. And it's very much based on trust and performance. And I'm sure that if you talked with any of the other operators, I know that you had the SEAC, Colon Lopez, on your show before too, and he'd probably tell you the same thing, because he does come from this community. So trust and performance have a lot to do with everything, and you have to earn that trust, right? So they're not going to talk to you about anything unless you understand the mission and the life that they live, like what it takes to do this mission. So that takes time. So I spend a lot of my time out in the areas doing whatever I can, whether it's turning a wrench with maintainers or, stacking pallets with logistics or anything that they'll let me do. I spend as much time learning about what it is they do, because then when I do come back here and I'm dealing with those management style tasks that I talked about earlier, or talking with headquarters, I have a relative working understanding of what it takes to do this mission here, because I'm the one that has to advocate for those resources, those things, right? That manning, those budgets, things like that. So I have to understand. I happen to really enjoy getting out of the office. I mean, it's a nice office, don't get me wrong, but I can't stay in here all day long. Trust me.
I know what you mean.
So yes. So the scope of the mission set that they have is really, it's combat search and rescue, right? That's what this wing does. And if you know anything about the lone survivor and, say, Marcus Luttrell, right, and his rescue, if you've heard that story, that was the 920th Rescue Wing. It was this wing who went in and picked up the lone survivor. It was, as a matter of fact, it was aircraft 227, which is sitting right on our ramp right now, getting ready to go to the museum in retirement. and the crews here from, well, not here, from our folks out at DM, so from the 305th Rescue Squadron and the 306th Rescue Squadron, which are part of this wing. So that's the bread and butter of what combat search and rescue does. And I mean, there's so many others, but that's an easy one to articulate to folks, right? And not really what was in the movie The Lone Survivor, because that was a different focus. The rescue from the movie of that really wasn't. There's a couple cool documentaries that you can look up on that rescue that talk specifically about what it took to actually execute that mission, and that'll give you, and if your viewers wanted to look it up, a really good understanding of what these operators do and the professional military athletes that they are. But we do a lot of other things too, right? So those things, that's the combat search and rescue side. Then there's the civil search and rescue side, right? So that we do quite often, right? We have a rescue wing up in our rescue squadron, the 304th Rescue Squadron, which is Guardian Angel Squadron up in Portland, Oregon. And they are constantly getting calls for hikers and climbers up on Mount Rainier and things like that, right? Civil search and rescue. We have the Guardian Angels and the helicopters at Davis Mountain, right? The 943rd Rescue Group, which is part of us as well. They're always getting calls for hikers and people in danger out in the desert in that area. And then of course here at Patrick, right? The most recent one, we had a 12-year-old boy on a cruise ship last May. The cruise ship was 350, 400 miles off the coast of Florida, heading north back to New York. It was a Carnival cruise ship. And the boy had a perforated bowel and had gone septic. So the cruise line called in, that they needed to medevac this child off the ship. And the Coast Guard just can't get that far out. Right. There's some unique capabilities with combat search and rescue that even the Coast Guard doesn't have, like being able to air refuel the helicopters, right? Because there's only so much fuel you can carry on a helicopter. So to be able to get 400 and 500 miles out one way, so 1,000-mile round trip, you need to be able to take fuel, and that's one of the primary missions of the HCJ 130 is to pass fuel to the helicopters, right? So we can put Guardian Angels on the helicopters, get them out to the ship, which is so far out, and then of course the 130 provides airborne command and control over the seat. So it's a whole team effort. All of that is really combat search and rescue related. The difference is that nobody's shooting at them on their way out to the cruise ship on the way back, right? That they're not going into a highly contested environment. So the skills that it takes to execute that rescue, like hovering over a moving cruise ship, because they don't slow down. They slow down a little bit, but they keep steaming in their direction, and being able to do a hoist in a helicopter 15 stories up over the water, with civilians, all over the place, takes a significant amount of precision on everybody's part. And then of course having the pararescuemen and combat rescue officers in the back to provide aid to that boy and his mother. They actually hoisted both up and took him to a hospital in Wilmington, North Carolina, right? And then flew all the way home. So that was a long day. So that's the kind of things we do day to day in between all of the training evolutions that it takes to be combat ready and then deploying, right? Because it's a very high demand, low density mission set. To kind of put things in perspective, we have about 25% of the Department of Defense's combat search and rescue capability in the 920th, the entire department of dedicated combat search and rescue. So there's not a lot of these men and women who do this mission. So they are in high demand and deployed almost constantly. We always have somebody out the door downrange doing the mission. So they have to stay pretty sharp while they're at home too.
Wow, it's a seriously incredible, impactful mission you guys are doing there. And I think all I'm wondering now, really, at the back end of that, and listening to all the stuff that you've done, not only just the general stuff, but these incredible missions and those legendary missions that you guys have been on, how do you prepare for such high stakes situations like this? I mean, how do you ensure the team is ready for that? And I mean, it sounds like, trying to draw parallels here and stuff, but you guys clearly have a lot of very diverse situations you have to deal with. So no one is all the same. They're all kind of fluid, different people, different locations, environments, and situations. Is it combat? Is it non-combat? Is it a threat? Not threat? All these different things. How do you get a rescue wing like that up to speed with dealing with all of that, being ready to deal with any of that stuff? It's kind of like I imagine, yeah, restaurant with a massive menu kind of a thing. You can't do everything well unless you have some seriously great training and a big team who are on it from different angles. So, what do you think goes into that?
Well, so they there's a lot, right? So they spend a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of training that's happening. It's constant, all of the time. The diff, we also have, I mean, we have folks who've been doing this a very long time too, right? So there's that too. So, you know, we don't necessarily have a lot of brand new airmen fresh out of tech school or fresh out of, right? We have a pretty experienced group of folks in the wing, right? So, so they've been doing it a long time. Now, they're also not comfortable. And I say this, because you can get very complacent. You do something for a very long time. They don't do that. They train every single day. Obviously, the motto of rescue is, these things we do that others may live, right? So, and they live by that, constantly. So you can't find a day when they're not training, they're not working, honing their skills, to get better at it constantly, pushing the envelope. So the real thing to lead that, and I know you keep saying you guys, again, I'm just their command chief, right? I'm not, but my job is to facilitate the needs that they have to get after that training, to make sure that they have those resources, and that I keep all of I call it noise, right? The things that distract them from being able to stay single focused on their mission, right? They're special operators. They're the best at what they do, right? The special mission aviators in both the HH-60 and the loadmasters and crews in the 130, plus all of that. And it's a cultural thing too, right? So like we have security forces just like every wing has security forces, but here we call them rescue defenders, right? Because they have a different mission, right? We have different, I guess, different requirements that we push on even our medical folks. And everybody here is rescue something. This is what you do, and tie them back to that mission, right? Because it's that value proposition, right? If people feel like they're valued members of an important team doing meaningful work, all you really have to do is get out of the way and let them go, because they will take care of all the details, right? So that works really well here in this community. So my job is to make sure that they have that value and they understand the meaning of what it is that they do, and they don't take it for granted, because it is very, very dangerous work. But it's their job to make sure that somebody's worst day isn't their last day. And rescue is very different too, right? It's not really just a mission set. It's kind of a promise, and that's what everybody believes. It's a very pretty sacred promise that we will be ready, we will go, and we will bring our own home, right?
Yeah.
So that's very easy to tie people to, and that's probably the easiest part of this job, is to explain to some young airman who's fresh out of basic training and tech school what it is we do here, or what it is they're part of, and then you just kind of let it take hold from there. So
That is a
that's
great
the
answer.
easiest thing, and I think
Yeah.
that's probably I think that's probably a big uh, that's probably a pretty valuable leadership lesson if you really stop and think about it, right? So like, I don't have to tell somebody how to do their job, because I'm certainly not qualified to tell everybody how to do. I mean, we have a lot of very diverse, mission, AFSCs we call them, right, in the Air Force. And I have a lot of it in the wing. I can't tell everybody how to do their job, right? But I can tie them to the mission and explain to them how it is important to do what it is that we do, and how important it is for them to be good at what they do. And then they're a special group of folks. So and you just let them surprise you with their ingenuity, and they'll figure out better ways to do things. So it's pretty awesome to come to work and watch them watch them do what they do.
I bet. I mean, it must be just
So,
an incredible experience to see that and be part of that in the leadership role as
oh, it is.
well. So yeah, we always get into a bit of actionable stuff for people too. So I think there's loads to be picked up on there from your experience and everything you've seen within the wing. But if we kind of go a bit deeper into that too, for people, running businesses and organizations, families, whatever that may be, it seems like you've got that, down on all fronts. But especially within the wing, any other core principles that you focus on to foster that really great effective leadership within the team, and definitely tie this in a way that people can kind of understand how they can apply this into their situations. So just those best lessons that you've seen within what you're doing and the place where you're working, and what you're seeing in your people, and how we can maybe take a bit of that and try and apply it into our world essentially.
So, yeah. Um, the thing about the the military, right, is you meet a lot of people from all over the place, right? Everybody in this wing and everybody you meet comes from a different background. They're come from different socioeconomic, settings, different family upbringings, um, different religious beliefs, things like that. They all have different backgrounds, and you're really trying to bring all of them together as one, right? So I think the lesson that kind of applies across the board, whether you're in civil service, out of the military, in the military, wherever you happen to be, is that to meet people where they are, right? Obviously, you set expectations. This is what we want done. This is how we want to do. This is our culture, right? But you have to meet people where they are, and each individual requires a little bit different interaction, right? And they all have different needs. And as a leader, you have to try to understand those needs and get to know those individuals so you can give them what they need to be successful, right? And that's what it's all about. If you can make them successful, they'll make everybody else successful around them, right? And you by trade, right? It's not about you as a leader. I mean, I'm not going to get promoted again, right? There's no more. There is no more for me. My job is to give back, right? So if you're going to lead somebody, your job is to give them everything you can and teach them what they need to know to be successful, if that makes sense, right? It's kind of an analogy. It's kind of a goofy analogy. It's not very military, but I'll tell it to you. is So I always say that management is grandma's baking and leadership is grandma's cooking, right? I grew up with my grandmother in the house, my four older brothers, my parents, and my grandparents, right? And my grandmother, Polish lady, would loved to cook, and she was great at it. So I spent a lot of time with her, and I noticed just in reflection that when she was baking things, it was very specific, right? So she would put in a very specific ingredients in the oven at a very specific temperature for a very specific amount of time, and you got the same result every time. And I kind of equate that to training. That is training. If we do these things in the appropriate amount of time at the correct amount of repetitions, like, you're going to get this result. That's training. Management. But leadership is her cooking. I don't even think she had a cookbook. I don't think she ever had a written down recipe, right? She literally started cooking. She knew what she wanted to make and she had the basic ingredients, but sometimes it took an hour, sometimes it took half a day, right? You just never knew what you were going to get because you never knew what was needed at that particular moment. So she spent a lot of time, tasting and adding and adjusting and making differences, little adjustments to get it the way it needed to be. And that's very much leadership, right? So you have to meet people where they are as individuals and then fold them into the team, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot
So,
of
like I said,
sense.
it's not very military strategy talking about grandma's cooking, but it's just one that I always equated to like what I needed to do as a leader and stop setting my expectations onto people. Like, I have my expectations of where I think everybody needs to be or where they should be, but that's my job to get them there, not their job to be where I expect them to be the very second I meet them.
I think
So,
that's very humble,
so you
actually.
have to temper those.
Yeah.
If
Definitely.
that makes, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Makes a load of
So
sense. Trust me, that makes a lot of sense. And I really like the analogy too. And I'm half Polish as well, so I'm sure that grandma's cooking was as good as the one from my parents too, for sure. So something else you
I
mentioned is
definitely miss
that
it.
ensuring the enlisted force is ready to fight hard and that the officer corps is worthy of leading them. So that's a key part of your role. What does the balance of that look like in practice, and how do you ensure both groups meet the standard there? And I think there's so much we can take from this subject.
So, yeah. So actually, I didn't write that into my bio. The colonel that hired me here, who's a combat rescue officer here at the 920th, who's now retired, actually put that in there because that was his expectation of me, right, as his senior enlisted leader, which really goes without writing down, but that's our job, right? So, um, the officer corps obviously is smaller than the enlisted corps by quite a bit, right? So, but they're responsible for leading, right? And you've got everything from young lieutenants all the way through colonels here in the wing, '06 colonels, right? And they have responsibilities as leadership, right? To understand what the needs are of the folks they lead. So a lot of times it's my job as the chief. I do get a lot of latitude as the command chief of the wing to sit down and have very frank and just specific conversations with officers, right? To tell them, hey, this is where we're making mistakes. This is what we need to do better. This is you need to square this away. Now, obviously, very respectfully, right? Because I joke and E9 still salutes O1 first in every parking lot on the planet, right? So you can't get too big for your britches, but that is my job as the somebody who's been a chief master sergeant for a long time is to explain to them what it is that they need to do to lead that corps, right, of enlisted folks. Focusing on the enlisted side of it, as far as they're ready to fight hard, right, it's really just making sure they fully understand the requirements of the mission, right? And that means, you get up, you need to be physically fit, mentally fit, emotionally ready to go do the job that you do all the time. And it's a very life and death game that they play here. And making sure they understand the gravity of the situation. Again, it's pretty simple because we can introduce them to people who are alive today because of the efforts of the men and women, that are in this mission set, whether they be here or anywhere across the rescue community. I mean, we can show that. So it's very easy to show that what it looks like when you're ready to do your job. And that's a pretty powerful motivator. On the flip side, we can tell stories and show pictures of people who are not here today because of one reason or another, right? And that's a very powerful motivator too, right? That this is a very, very serious mission set. So, so it's just my job to keep that in perspective for everybody, to make sure that I'm always keeping their focus on what their mission is. And like I said, it's to make sure that somebody's worst day isn't their last day, right? I mean, if you think about it, the Operation Red Wings, right? The lone survivor, scenario, right? That was a very, very, right, hairy situation, and there was a lot of people who lost their lives that day, and in that operation, right? And it was rescue had to go in there and get them out. So, you're taking some C-130s and some helicopters and some very not stealthy, heavily armored, vehicles going in there to where there's a lot of bad guys doing a lot of bad things. And they go. Without hesitation, they go. Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, right, the leadership that was in the wing, that was in that particular mission set, they're the ones that said, we can go do this. And even the leadership that was over there said, are you guys sure? And they're like, yeah, we could do this. And so they went up the first day under fire, weren't able to actually get to him, had to go back the second day where they could get him out. And then they went back the next day to get the remains of everybody else, because that's part of the mission too. Everybody comes home. So that's it's easy to talk about those things and show them like the magnitude of the mission that they have to go do. So that's an easy motivator to keep them ready to fight hard. And then setting the boards to know what they have to do to be ready, keeping them motivated. But yeah, so that's kind of where that is. I mean, we could talk about that all day long if you wanted to, one way or the other. But it's easy to keep them motivated. In most cases, they motivate me, right? Because I'm the one that has to try to keep up with them. But I have to try to keep up with them, because if I don't, then I won't earn their trust. I won't have it because I'm not trying to be part of their world. And that relationship really does enable me to have influence, which is really what leadership is, influence across the swing to get things across the line that need to happen so that we are ready when the time comes.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredible initiative and mission set. And I think it would be remising that to actually speak a little bit about Lone Survivor then, because I mean, it's been a while since I watched the movie, but I didn't remember there being a part that showcases the fact that you guys went back the next day to go and pick up the bodies and the remains. I don't remember that being in the movie, and I think that's a massive miss if that wasn't actually in there, but I need to go and check and see that. But I got to ask some questions about that then. So was Mike Murphy's body recovered? And maybe you could just tell me a little bit about what that mission was like the next day. So if you go from, the end of Lone Survivor, what was the next day of that like? Was it, a nightmare still, or did it start to calm down then? Yeah, what happened?
So none of that was really showcased in the movie, because again, the movie was about up until the point they brought, till they got Mark Wahlberg's character out, right? So that was really what that was focusing on. So it really wasn't focusing on the rescue piece of it, just that it had happened and what it took to get him, like his struggle along the way. Like that was so I'm not trying to take anything away from the actual movie. Certainly don't say anything and about what they went through. But and again, I was not part of the wing back then. I was at the 916th at the time. So I've talked with some of the pilots. One of them who just recently retired a year ago, Lieutenant Colonel Gonzalez, was one of the pilots who flew that. He was in our wing until about a year ago. One of the pilots, Colonel McCrander, retired as the wing commander here, right? So they've been around. When I say folks stay in this mission set for a long time, they stay in this mission set for a long time. But the most intense fighting they ran up against was actually going in to get the remains the next day, and that was the according. I mean, they didn't go into too many details, and all of the folks who do this mission, they're super humble, right? So they'll say things like, "Oh yeah, it was just worse," or it was heavier fighting. But that's all they'll say. They won't really go into because they're super humble about what they do. But when you, like I said, there's some documentaries. There's one of them on YouTube. I think if you look up, if you just look up 920th Rescuing or Operation Red Wings, I can even send you the link. That really, it's about an hour long that talks about the rescue portion of that particular mission, and they're interviewing the pararescuemen and the aircrew members from the 920th. They're going into pretty much that's probably where the most information that I have concerning that came from, because those guys would never tell you face to face. They're just so humble. But I can send you the link for that because it was, according to those accounts, worse going in under heavier fire to recover the remains after they got Marcus Luttrell out.
Yeah,
so
I think that would be I don't know how possible that would be, but that sounds like a great potential future podcast to have and speak on that, because I think there's a really important piece there. And I know obviously it sounds like you guys have covered it, but I think, going after that and looking at the work that was done, so important, not just from a moral standpoint, but, honor and just upholding that, that brotherhood and stuff, so important on so many levels. And I think that's for a lot of people. I mean, for me right now, I can feel how inspiring that is, but I can imagine for a lot of other people that would be too. And for a lot of kids as well, I hope that a lot of people that story connects with, because that connects with me. The fact that after all that was said and done, all the Hollywood stuff had kind of wrapped up and everything, in the real world, there was another day after that of harder fighting where they had to go back and, do the hard work, and there was no hesitation and all of that. That is a beautiful thing, I think. And
nice.
If we're talking about
and actually when
yeah, go for it. Hit me up.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Okay.
one it just came to mind that when you're talking to some of the crew members, it was high up in the mountains. Thin air, helicopters don't perform super well, and you have to take. So they were doing things like taking guns off the helicopters to get weight off the helicopter to make sure that they had uh, enough energy to get up that high into the mountains, right? So you really that kind of hit hard with me that you're taking the only defensive measures off of the helicopter that you have to go into harm's way, right? Your only real protection, so you can go into harm's way. That says a lot about the mentality of the people who do the mission, because it's that important to them to execute, right? So you'd almost think it's insane, and it kind of is. But that's the kind of things when they tell you that story that they're willing to take off, you know, some if not all of the munitions or the armament plates that are in the bottom of the helicopter that protect them from fire from underneath, but they're doing everything they can to save weight because they know where they have to go and they have to get there. So the lengths, the measures they'll go through to get to their mission, like to get it done, like there's no bounds there. And that's pretty, so when I say those, they inspire me. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that just point came to mind when you were talking about it.
I think that level of selflessness, professionalism, brotherhood, and honor, that's something that gets remised nowadays, especially in the young youth and stuff. And I just wish that more people had whatever that is in those people that possess them to go and do those things. I think that's something we need to instill in the youth. And I think this would be a great opportunity to talk a little bit about all of that too. So, finding within yourself and developing that level of what those guys and gals had to do that. And think about it all the way that they did, no hesitation, let's go and do this thing, do the job. Where can young people find that? Where can they start to develop that? And what could a great kind of bit of advice look like for maybe getting started in the military for a kid listening in right now who was really inspired by all of that too? So a few bits to hit there, but yeah, just a bit for the youth really.
Mm-hmm. So the way to, I mean, the only way to understand like that type of person is to be around them, right? So, um, so my advice, to the youth is look for opportunities to go hear some of those people speak, right? So the SEAC, right, Cologne Lopez, right, and there's so many out there. When Lieutenant Colonel Peterson or Lieutenant Colonel Gonzalez or any of those people are coming to talk, right? When you go, if Marcus Luttrell is speaking or any of these folks, even if you don't know what it is they're all about or what you've done, there's so many military heroes out there, right? So Medal of Honor recipients, and they go out into the youth to meet them, right? Not to, because they're so humble, not to make them, so they could tell their story to tell these kids how cool they are, because they would never do that. But to just inspire those kids, right? To just be around, right? So I would say the advice to the youth is when you see those opportunities, even if you're just wondering what it's all about, to go listen to these people speak or go meet these folks, because when you're around that type of person, um, it just if that's within you, it'll ignite it, right? If that's the type of person you are, if you have that type of selflessness inside of you, it'll ignite it, and you'll know that this is what you want to do. And it's that whole, if you're the smartest person in the room, you got to find another room. If you're you got to find a bigger room to get into so you can continue to learn. And this is that same kind of thing. There's so many inspiring folks out there that are willing, that come tell their stories or talk about what their life like. And there's lots of podcasts. You don't even have to go find them. There's so much technology these days that, I mean, you've had some great guests on your podcast, right? But if they just watch them and hear a little bit about what they're about, if that ignites that spark in them, then they should probably consider service in the military. It doesn't have to be a lifetime. Matter of fact, most of the folks who serve in the military don't serve longer than 4 or 6 years, at enlistment. They earn some benefits through college or whatever, and then continue their life in a different route. But they spend that time growing up, because the person I was at 22 was not the person I was at 18 when I came into the military, right? You mature a lot, right? And you mature in a way that is very controlled. You wouldn't think it would be, but if you think about it, my first assignment, I was living in a dorms. I had 3 meals a day. I didn't have to worry about any of the adult type things like, paying the electric bill or the water bill, right? I didn't have to do those things because it was very controlled. I knew where I was going to live. I had all my basic needs, and I could grow up, right, around some like-minded people, until I was ready to kind of be my own, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, there's so much out there, and there's so many inspiring. We've been basically in direct conflict since, September 11th, 2001. The whole world has, right? The United States and all of its allies. So there's so many folks in all of these communities around the world that have done so many great things that their stories aren't hard to find. And I think that just making that available to the youth to see, because they're just human beings doing extraordinary things, but it's what everybody's capable of doing if they just find that within themselves. So.
I like it. This ties really well into my last question then. And I tend to ask this one at the back end of the podcast with a few of my recent guests, and trying to make it a new show tradition as much as I can remember to ask it. But this goes back well, because you mentioned there that young you was a very different person. And I'd love to just tie it back then and go, if you had that moment now being who you are, to speak to a young you, 13, 14-year-old you, just trying to figure all this stuff out, what would be that minute of wisdom that you'd give to that young version of you? What would you have needed to hear back then, I guess?
Wow, there's a lot of trust yourself, right? Trust your instincts. I think that that we limit ourselves mentally a lot. It's proven fact, and you can do so much more. Like, if you just don't quit, when you think when your mind tells you want to quit, you can go so much further than you would ever imagine, right? Your limits are way beyond what you limit yourself to in your own mind, right? So, trust yourself when you believe that you can do more. You can go further. There's no limit to what you can do if you're simply willing to try. And then there's a second part to that. And I know that you said one thing, but I don't think there's any one thing that kind of stems up. Failure is the only teacher, right? Failure, and that's okay. You have to fail. That's how you grow. You make a mistake, you grow, and those are okay. They're okay for yourself, and they're okay for others. As long as it's not done, maliciously or in an intent to undermine or hurt somebody else. Like, failure is okay. Fail and learn from it, and then try again, and just don't quit. And next thing you know, you'll look back and you've not only done that thing, you've done so many more things that you never ever thought were possible. And success is contagious, right? So once you taste it, you never want to put it down. But I think some people, especially youth, right? They've been, and we all have. I think the only difference between us and some of the other is we weren't allowed to quit. And once you realize that you can do something, that that's the way. Just keep pushing forward.
Yeah.
So, and everything will work itself out.
I think that's great. That's a really nice place to round this off, I think. We've had a great talk today. I think everything that you're doing, the Wings doing, the past, and everything that's going to do in the future is absolutely incredible. And I'm so glad to have been able to share those stories today. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory almost, but we always have that shameless plug at the end. So I like to say, it's not a moment necessarily for promoting websites and social media, although it totally is, but it's for things that you believe in or you want people to take a look at. So that could be anything from a piece of work or a book or a website or somewhere to talk to a recruiter or just about anything. So, if someone listening in has made it this far in this podcast, where would you want them to go next? That's the big question there.
So probably, I mean, one of the books that was given to me a long time ago was it's called The Enchiridion by Epictetus, right? So it's a very Stoic philosophy type mindset, right? I would say take a look at that. It's a very small book. It's a manual. It's not very thick at all. But so Epictetus was Marcus Aurelius's, advisor, right? So that really sets a lot of things in perspective, so that you can understand that things aren't really good, things aren't really bad. They're really more what you make of them. And I think that helped me put things in perspective a long time ago, which really then helps you get through good days and bad days, right? Because you're going to have both. So I think that, if you're really not sure how to look at things, or people are struggling with how to maintain, balance or harmony, I guess is a better word, to maybe start there and take a peek at what some of those thought processes are and some of those philosophies. And then, of course, if anybody's remotely interested in joining the military or interested in that, don't be afraid to talk to, if you don't want to talk to a recruiter, talk to somebody who's in the military or has been, and then decide whether that's something you want to pursue, right? Because it is a great opportunity, and it does provide a good foundation for whatever somebody might want to do for their whole life, for the rest of their life.
I like it. That's great. James, super impactful, super humbled to have done this with you today, and I just want to thank you for your service and for the service of everyone in the Air Force, but especially the wing today. What an incredible group of people, and I know you must be incredibly proud of what you do and the people that work around you. But I just want to express, as a civilian and on the behalf of everyone listening in today, that we really appreciate you, everything that you do. It's incredible, and I'm so happy to have shared all this today, and it's been a true honor. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this. It's been a true pleasure. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for having me on, Louis.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for spending your time with us today. This was episode 140. If you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. If you'd like to listen in for the future ones too, there's loads of great ones coming up. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now. Thank you guys for listening. See you in the next one. Cheers.